And by that point, people had become pretty much obsessed with Michelle Obama and with the transformation that she had made from being someone quite behind the scenes into a public speaker who was really, even Obama himself says people are more interested in my wife than they are in me. Don't take 40,000 years of patriarchy into a meeting with you, because it's not your problem to solve. Like, you cannot solve that. The same way that as a stand-up, you can't go on and be great and have every single person in the room think, oh, I really think women are funny now. If there's somebody who has that, stupid preconception that they don't like women comedians, like, that's not your problem, that's theirs. I had always wanted to do comedy, and I was finding in my journalism that I was writing a lot of columns around this time, a lot of opinion writing, and I was finding that what I really wanted to write was like the little pithy asides or the sign off or the payoff. I didn't really want to write, a 2,000 word opinion piece. I just wanted to write like an 80 word funny bit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Have Extraordinary Relationships podcast with me, your host, Lucy Cavendish. Today, I'm thrilled to be with Viv Groskop. I'm sure you may all know Viv, but if not, I'm going to tell you who she is. She's an award-winning writer, comedian, broadcaster, and performance coach. She's the author of 7 books, including the bestselling How to Own the Room, and The Art of Women and the Art of Brilliant Speaking, published by Penguin, and Lift As You Climb, Women in the Art of Ambition. So there's definitely a theme here, also published by Penguin. Her award-nominated podcast, How to Own the Room, is the biggest public speaking podcast in the world, with over 2 million downloads. That's absolutely phenomenal. And features interviews with Hillary Clinton, Margaret Atwood, Professor Mary Beard, Julie Andrews, Googling CEO Matt Britton, Succession's Brian Cox, and Obama speechwriter Sarah Hurwitz, and over 150 more guests. You talk a lot about public speaking. You're also a comedian. You help people manage high pressure situations, and you have other books, including the Anna Karenina Fix, bestseller in translation Russia and Finland, and One Ukrainian Summer, which was shortlisted for the 2025 Ilse Schwepke Prize. Have I got that name correct?
Yeah, you have. The Ilse Schwepke Prize from Germany.
Ilse Schwepke Prize from Germany. And you're regularly on TV, radio, 9 radio plays produced on BBC Radio 3 and BBC Radio 4. You've hosted book tours for Graham Norton, Dawn French, Miriam Margolis and Joe Brand. And for 6 years, you did a run of sold-out one-woman shows at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
All the things, Lucy, all the things.
And we haven't finished yet. Hang on, the paper I've helped you with them. Women in the Art of Brilliant Public Speaking is out in March 2026. And that's, I've known you ish on and off for a long time. And I saw that was current paperback, and that's why I wanted to grab you, because I was like, yay. So, where do we start? I mean, I really do want to know about, your books. I really do want to know How to Own the Room and what appeals to people about that. Because obviously the podcast is insanely popular.
Yeah, I mean, I know that on this podcast, we're going to be talking about an extraordinary relationship. And for me, that relationship is connection.
Yes.
Whatever that means, with other people, with language, with humor, like whatever connects you to another person, that's what I'm really interested in. And I always have been. And that is what interests me in journalism, in writing, in comedy, and everything. And I think with the project How to Own the Room, which started as a book and then became a podcast, and it has really lasted 10 years. The book has been out. I started it 10 years ago. The book's been out for 8 years, and it's only just coming out in paperback. And I don't really see a time when people are not going to be interested in whatever this means to them. So I've always tried to make that topic, how to own the room, not only for people who want to do, in inverted commas, what we call public speaking, whatever that is. It always sounds like such an old-fashioned term, but people who want to connect with other people around them, whether it's that they want to come across better in the gazillion Teams meetings that they have to have, or whether they want to be more confident on the phone, or whether they want to be able to, give a eulogy at a funeral. There are so many weird definitions of what public speaking is in the modern world. It's very
Yeah.
often not the sort of public speaking that people would have been taught in a grammar school 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So all of it for me comes under the banner of people wanting to connect with other people and feeling nervous about how they do that, or even if they're not nervous, wanting to know what the best practice is. And it's, I started the podcast kind of on a whim just after the book came out, because the book is really my analysis of other women's public speaking, from Michelle Obama to Oprah Winfrey to Virginia Woolf to Joan Rivers, like, dozens and dozens of different examples, but it's all my analysis
Mm.
and my own experiences from comedy, what I've learned about it and how I evaluate other people. And then when the book came out, I thought, oh, I really want to actually speak to other women about this and do a sort of proper journalistic inquiry into their public speaking journey. And it just went from there. The first guest was Nigella Lawson, and then we had Professor Mary Beard in the first series, and then we had Trini Woodall and loads of really interesting women. And initially I thought, oh, I'll do about 10 of these interviews, and then I probably won't be able to find very many more people who've done very much public speaking.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
then it just kept expanding and expanding, because I realized that the definition of it applies to everybody.
yeah.
Everybody, no matter what their line of work is, no matter what they're doing in their life, they have to do things where they feel like they need more confidence than they've got. And what I really learned on the podcast is that even very scary people, like, Mary Portas, she's pretty intimidating, amazing person.
Yeah.
She has her moments of thinking, what she calls, she gets goat voice.
Goat
She gets
voice.
goat voice, she gets nervous, or she has some, something she has to do where she feels like, oh, people are going to expect me to be funny now, and I don't know if I want to do that today. Like, everybody
Mm.
has their moments, even really, really self-possessed people. And I've always felt that the more that you share that and show it and prove it, the more reassuring that is for other people.
So there's so many questions there. So first question, so what do they all share? Is there something that people share? So yes, I absolutely agree. I mean, connection, I think, is vital. And I've been to talks, let's say, where the person hasn't connected, they're too nervous, or they're hiding behind a screen, and it hasn't gelled. Now, I don't know if there's one thing that means people have the ability to connect, or whether it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, well, from my point of view, and I don't really talk about this very often because I think it's a little bit too therapy-ish, but I think it's to do with ego.
Okay.
So if you are somebody who has a lot of ego,
Mm.
that is really going to get in the way of the connection. And, what do I mean by that? I mean, you really care more about how you come across and that everyone thinks you're amazing
Yes.
than you care about actually being there to do something for them. And it's very interesting because, in the modern world, there are a lot of people with a lot of ego who are very, very heavily rewarded. And it's very interesting to me that often the conversation we're having on the podcast is about trying to find another way of doing things where you're stripping away the ego, you're not just making it about yourself, you're trying to connect with other people and bring them with you, or impart something, or encourage, or inspire.
Yes.
And I feel like maybe that's one of the reasons that this is an interesting conversation for people as well, is because the sort of connection that they want or that they crave is not necessarily very much in evidence at the moment, certainly on a political level.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And I think there is a bit of a moment of people questioning, what does it mean to be a good public speaker, like to be a good political speaker? how does that compute with what we would expect from someone who is an influencer? And,
Mm.
where does ego sit amongst all of that? And for me personally, I'm always looking for something that is a little bit raw and unpolished, where somebody's kind of putting something on the line, they're risking something
Yes.
so that they're kind of allowing me to lean in and connect with them.
That's really interesting. So, what do you have something recently that you could think of that you really just that you thought I really feel connected?
Well, it's a bit of a cliched example, but Michelle Obama is always going to
Yeah,
tick the box
she is.
as an
She is.
example of this. So, when I first started this project, she was one of the main reasons that I was able to get this book off the ground, because I had just been doing 10 years of comedy and I had that experience. But that's very intimidating and not very interesting for other people because most people do not want to become a stand-up comedian and they don't really want to know what that's actually like, or they do for about 5 minutes and then they're not interested anymore. But I knew I had that experience that I wanted to try and translate into something that other people could understand. And
Mm,
at the same time, this would be around, yeah, 2016. So, the end of the Obama years.
mm,
And by
mm.
that point, people had become pretty much obsessed with Michelle Obama and with the transformation that she had made from being someone quite behind the scenes into a public speaker who was really, even Obama himself says people are more interested in my wife than they are in me.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
it was a real moment 10 years ago that lots of people were saying, how has she done that? What is it that she does that's so engaging? How is she so amazing? And so part of what I was doing was trying to translate that and explain it. And it's really interesting to now look 10 years later because she's again completely reinvented herself. And it's really interesting that the person that she was then, I think, was not fake. And it was an authentic version of her being quite professional and quite measured as a first lady, not really showing her full self, but showing a professional version of herself that was sort of politically safe. And now, 10 years later, she's showing this much more raw version of herself. She's much more open about the difficulties of that time. And
Mm,
she does lay something on the line. She usually takes a risk virtually every single clip that you'll see of her. She's saying something slightly vulnerable or something slightly personal, not too
mhm,
personal because she
mhm.
doesn't want to make people feel uncomfortable. She doesn't really try to be liked, but she doesn't seek to be disliked. I think she's a very interesting speaker in that regard. And I think she's going to become more interesting as time goes on.
Do you think that's all genuine? Does it matter? I mean, I think that has to be a genuine core to it, personally. I don't
Yeah,
think it's
I
hard.
do,
I mean,
because
mm,
I think with some people, well, also the thing you mustn't forget ever about whatever you call owning the room or public speaking or how being yourself in front of other people, it's completely subjective. So there's nobody who can be objectively brilliant and excellent and loved by
yeah,
everybody. There's nobody.
yeah,
And, when I was doing the research for the book and having talked about this many times, there's loads of people who do not appreciate Michelle Obama's way of speaking, who don't
okay.
like her, etc., etc. It's so there is that's another thing that I think is quite inspiring, is that there is no perfection. There's no there's nothing that's going to get everyone. But I would say for me, objectively, she's the standard and she's genuine, and I'm always interested in what she has to say.
So this, I mean, you were a journalist. You still are a journalist, but I mean, at some point, you decided to go and be a stand-up comedian. I remember when I heard that, I was like, because I did one course with Logan Murray actually. Maybe people listening have done that. I went and performed somewhere, I can't remember where, and it was the most excruciating thing I'd ever done. So what, I mean, you can be funny, but standing up and being funny is very different. What led you to that, to thinking I'm going to go and do stand up?
Yeah, I think it was really around the time of the 2008 crash that I began to think about this because I had then been a journalist and worked for myself for oh my God, like 7 or 8 years, right? By that point. So I was relatively well established. I was quite happy with my life. I just started to have children. Um, but I was a little bit sort of antsy already. And then around the crash, around sort of 2008, 2009, this was before everyone was on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just before all of that.
Mm.
I got let go from a couple of contracts. I could sort of see the writing on the wall that things were not going to stay the same as they had in the beginning of my career. So I, left university in 1995 and I had that like the tail end of the good old days, really. And
Yes,
I could
yeah,
see those days are gone. That is
yeah, they
all
have. They're
gone.
completely gone.
And
Yeah.
you have to do what you want with your life. So I had that sort of playing away in the back of my mind. And then I lost a couple of contracts that were not crucial. Like it didn't mean that I'd lost everything, but it was enough for me to think this is a bit of a rupture and I need to do something drastic. And it just gave me the push. So I started to do lots of courses and workshops and open mics because I had always wanted to do comedy. And I was finding in my journalism that I was writing a lot of columns around this time, a lot of opinion writing. And I was finding that what I really wanted to write was like the little pithy asides or the sign off or the payoff. I
Yeah.
didn't really want to write, a 2,000 word opinion piece. I just wanted to write like an 80 word funny bit.
Yeah.
So
At the
I
bottom,
thought,
yeah.
if I can do that, but do it on stage instead of writing it down, you just say it to people. Again, I think I'd always wanted to be having that connection with people, whether
Yeah.
it's in the writing or direct.
Yes.
And yeah, I agree with you. Stand up, especially when you do it first and you don't know what you're doing, it is horrible. It's really difficult. But if you can persevere and learn the discipline of it and the craft of it, it's an amazing thing. And I think I realized that quite early on that yeah, this isn't supposed to be easy. It's like riding a bike. Like you have to actually fall off before
Yeah.
you learn how to ride it. Um, I just loved it. I loved it. There was a lot I hated often, and you have to push yourself through it. But the connection that you get with an audience in that room,
Yes.
there's nothing else like it.
Because you're
Yeah,
making them
so
laugh. You're making them laugh. They're having a good time. They're finding you funny.
yeah, it's the best thing. It's just the best thing. So I did that in the end, really, for about 10 years.
I think it's
And
incredible.
it was only really COVID that stopped me.
Well, I mean,
And
it's so brave. So there's a craft to that. You were saying that there's. So do you think? Okay, I want to connect with the audience in a way that means they're on side because you've got choice. Do some people do the you get to play a role. I imagine.
yeah, the really difficult thing I think a lot of people don't appreciate about stand up, unless you do it as a character like Alan Partridge or, a very heightened character where people can see, this person is not being themselves.
Yes.
You have to be a version of yourself that feels real to people and doesn't feel fake.
Mm,
And yet it can't feel like the way I'm talking to you now.
yes.
And I think for women, especially, that can be very difficult
Yeah.
because women are encouraged to speak to each other and to other people in such a way that is likable and open and friendly. And I remember talking to the brilliant stand-up Jo Caulfield about this once, and she describes it as the danger of people thinking a nice lady at a dinner party.
Yes.
And so you need to be able to speak in a way that is forceful enough that people can see where the punchline is and that they get what you are and who you are, but without it being fake. So you have to find like a kind of stage version of your real self.
Yes.
And that's hard. That is hard. I mean, some people do it very, very naturally, but for other people, it's going to be hard work.
So what was your state? I mean, Sarah Millican is sort of, the funny woman next door who actually talks about sex a lot or something.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, maybe that's, yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen her for years, but I mean, did you decide your persona, or did you have to decide what you're going to talk
Yeah,
about?
I think I was much more journalistic about it, and that's maybe why I don't do it anymore. I didn't want to be like a caricature or a type or a. I didn't like it when people would say to me, "What's your shtick?"
Okay.
When I didn't want to have a catchphrase, and I didn't like all of that.
Right.
So I kind of hopped around. I talked quite a lot about class and Britishness. I did a show called Be More Margot that was
Oh,
based on
yes,
the
yes,
Good
yes.
Life. I did
Yeah.
that in 2016. That sort of morphed into talking a little bit about Brexit and class and what that says about us. Um, I did another show called Anchor Woman, which was about our relationship with the news. I did a show called Vivalicious, which was all about self-improvement and how we can never be as great as we want to be. So I used it as a way of talking about things that I was interested in,
Yes.
um, which is what most people do in their stand-up anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the first time you got up, because at this point you weren't owning the room, I don't, or maybe you were owning, were you terrified?
No, I wouldn't say I was terrified. I was very curious. I think that's one thing that's really useful to always remember about doing these things. Just be curious and and don't be so self-obsessed. Like if it goes really badly, literally no one cares. No one cares. There are times when I did do really badly and I would I would cry on the way home. It's happened to
Mm,
me.
mm,
I've seen it happen to amazing people. You have to, if you're taking enough risks and you're not being boring and you're not always doing the safe thing, you are going to have, bad times. So no, but I was never kind of terrified. I was more curious of like, oh, is this thing going to work? And if this doesn't work, what's the other thing that I can try? And just always trying to make it less about me. You have to
mm.
make it just less about you all of the time. It doesn't really matter if no one cares what your experience of it is. They want you to make them laugh. That's it. It's
No,
not about you.
yes, yes. So
Yeah.
that's very helpful.
Yeah, it is really, really helpful. It's
Yes,
kind
it's
of
not about
easier.
you.
Yeah, it's easier said than done.
Mm.
Much easier said than done. And it's not really a lesson that you learn and then it's learned and that's it. You have to keep learning it. But it's the most valuable thing is it's not about you. And the less you can make it about you, the better for you and for everyone else. So it's like a double great lesson.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you could get up. And so did that when you started doing the podcast and talking to people, does that come into it about how do they have the ability to not care less, but be able to be curious and let things go and to be quite adaptable?
Um, yeah, often on the podcast, I will ask people about very specific moments. So when I interviewed Hillary Clinton, I wanted to ask her about probably the most difficult moment of her career, which is when she was at the debates with Donald Trump and the particular debate where he circled her. And so we often get into interesting things on the podcast about physicality and being
Yeah.
physically menaced or feeling small, or often people ask, what if somebody catches your eye in an audience and they're very hostile, or what if you have to do a presentation at work in front of a boss who is openly hostile? So I wanted to know from her what she had learned from that moment, and she voiced something that has come up as a theme on the podcast a lot, and that is not every moment is winnable, and you have to learn that there are some moments in your life where you've done the best that you can do, and that's it. And I think that was the conclusion she'd come to about that moment. Was she openly said, I'll always regret it in a sense, because whatever it was that I did, it wasn't quite the right thing,
Mm,
but there was nothing else I could have done.
mm.
And I think that's a very useful thing to learn for confidence and public speaking as well, is you just do your best. And some days it's going to work and some days it's not, and that's okay, because what a lot of people who don't have very much experience don't realize is that you will have dozens, hundreds, thousands of opportunities to do this.
Yes.
It's not just one time.
Yes.
So let yourself off the hook.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, that's not much comfort to Hillary Clinton, who did have that one moment. But then I think she spoke with a sort of grace. You know, I spoke to her 3 years after that happened,
Mm,
and she'd
mm.
had the time to consider it and give herself some forgiveness and compassion and grace of, again, it's not all about you. You know, like it wasn't all on her.
Mm.
You know, maybe she didn't lose that election, maybe someone else won it, and that's the way it goes. You
Yeah,
know,
very
you know.
tough. I mean, very tough
Yeah, really
with
tough.
that. So there is a difference between the connection that men have, I think, and the connection that women have. What do you feel?
Yeah, I think that societally the challenges are different for women, which is why this project for me has always been women in the art of brilliant speaking, and most of the people I speak to on the podcast are women.
Mm,
But that said, I don't think intrinsically as individuals there's anything about our biology or how we are as people that informs that. And I have lots of men who listen to the podcast and
mm,
lots of people who'll say this isn't so much about gender, it's more about whether you identify as an introvert or an extrovert. There's lots of different theories about why people feel like this might be difficult for them. What I'm interested in is the biases and preconceptions that we bring to this
yes.
that are not helpful.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm obsessed with that is because it was really important in comedy. So I would see it early on in comedy that certain people would fold their arms as a woman when you walked on. And I've heard it from other people as well. And, you know, this was like 15 years ago that I did this. And I hear from other people that this can still persist. And we see from the numbers, the statistics, like these things still persist.
Yeah.
And that's really not surprising because, you know, the pill wasn't invented until the 1960s. We've had, you know, 40,000 years of patriarchy where
Yes.
women were not really
Yes.
supposed to do things like this. So it's not really surprising. And I do think it's really important that we talk about that and allow yourself to be who you are, not carrying all of that. So I'll say sometimes to people who will ask a specific question about, oh, this man always talks over me in this meeting and what can I do about that, etc., etc. Don't take 40,000 years of patriarchy into a meeting with you because it's not your problem to solve. Like you cannot solve that. The same way that as a stand-up, you can't go on and be great and have every single person in the room think, oh, I really think women are funny now.
Yeah.
If there's
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
who has that, you know, stupid preconception that they don't like women comedians, like that's not your problem, that's theirs.
Mm,
So learning really what is and isn't your problem,
mm.
I think is a useful thing.
Do you find that women tend to say, yeah, say what that lady said, which is men seem to think, and I'm talking really generally, that they have a right to have their voice heard more than, let's say, women do. So
Oh yeah, I mean,
they're already owning the room before they even stood up.
yeah, well, this is borne out in hundreds of academic studies of um, all kinds of experiences, whether it's boardroom or even there have been studies of people wearing a microphone all day. How many times does a woman ask a question versus how many times does a man ask a question? Like there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies that bear out all of the stereotypes
Mm,
that we have. And I've witnessed it many times that a lot of men are more comfortable with entitlement than women are. And women find it more difficult to carry any form of entitlement or status simply
mm,
because we're not used to seeing it on them.
mm.
And when they do carry it, they'll often report that there's some kind of backlash to that. Now, I think some of this is getting a bit old fashioned and we're growing
Yeah.
out of it and we're seeing lots of different ways of behaving. Um, you know, I've just been watching a lot of the coverage about traitors actually, and I think traitors is a very interesting way to analyze this as well. Like there's been a whole lot of analysis of the biased ageism, racism, classism that all of these things go on.
Yes.
And what I try to do in the conversations that I want to open up is to talk about this, analyze it,
Mm.
and kind of set it to one side for you personally, because you're not a stereotype. These things might exist, but you don't have to pay any attention to them. Somebody might mansplain to you, but you don't have to react to that. You don't even have to even really notice it. You can just smile and move on.
Oh, well,
Um,
I'm interested in that. Okay, sorry, hang on a minute. So if someone mansplains to me, I want to say to them, can you please stop?
okay, I get, yeah, well,
Because I
that's
want to call it out because I don't want to go, that's okay, because it's not okay.
yeah, I guess I'm a bit more cynical than that, in that I just think that's their funeral and it's not my job to fix them as a person.
That's also true. Yeah.
And I would just smile and move on.
Okay.
If it was somebody I knew really well who would be horrified that they were mansplaining, then I would bother to waste my time.
Yes. So what
But
you're saying
if
is
that was
more
not
about,
proven,
yeah,
I wouldn't
yeah.
waste my time.
So for you, you said it was more about this is a waste of your time.
Yeah,
Think about where you want to put your energies.
exactly. Yeah, don't waste your energy on problems that you can't fix, or problems that are much so big that it's not your problem.
Yes, that's very
Yeah.
helpful, isn't it, for people? Do people struggle with that one, or do women go, okay, I kind of get it?
I think it depends, I think some people want to pretend like there's a quick fix,
Mm,
and a lot of the things that are worth doing, it's not rocket science. It falls under the banner of when they go low, we go high.
mm, mm.
Which is like, just rise above, mansplain away. I'm not going to listen to it. It's not my problem.
No, that's
Just
right. So you just move on.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's better, but if you feel like it's going to cost you something emotionally to get bothered by that and get annoyed, I don't want to experience that. I'm not interested.
Mm, that's really
Yeah.
helpful. So then you've done happy high status. So
Yeah.
they obviously link together. So tell us about.
Yeah. So happy high status is a concept that comes from improv and comedy. It's from a brilliant improv teacher called Keith Johnston. And I found out about it when I was first learning stand up and trying to figure out how to have presence on stage without coming across too forceful, or too not too much on the front foot, not too much on the back foot. Like, what does that look like? How does
Mm,
that feel? And happy high status is a quality of being relaxed, ready to lead if someone needs you to lead, ready to follow if someone else is leading. It's a very kind of open, relaxed
mm,
quality. The person always mentioned in connection with it is George Clooney. It's that kind of, it's not, some people mistake it for charisma, and like George Clooney's obviously got a ton of charisma, but it's like a kind of muted charisma. It's not going to be pushed in your face and like trying to seduce everybody.
mm.
It's a kind of a neutral energy. Both of the Obamas have it in abundance,
Yeah.
and it does fit in with that when they go low we go high, as in, you're never petty. Like when they go low we go high is a little bit more snooty and kind of, I'm above all of this. Whereas happy high status is just, that's okay, that's fine. It's being in a very neutral energy and being able to talk to anybody.
Is it also about if the low high, if you're going high, is the idea is that people might raise up a little bit. They might get out of the low bit and kind of come up a little bit.
Yeah, well, the idea of it is that you're not trying to lord it over everybody,
No.
but you're also not allowing anyone else to dominate you. So it originally comes from drama, comedy, you use it on stage in improv. And
Mm,
happy high status, you would never be that in a drama scene or a comedy scene, because there's nowhere to go and there's no conflict. So in those, you would always adopt a low status, like Baldric. In Blackadder, that's low status,
Yeah.
and Blackadder is high status. He's not happy high status.
No, he's not.
A happy high status character is someone much more neutral. So happy high status is more like, in comedy or stage terms, it would be the MC. So somebody
Mm.
like, Graham Norton, he's happy high
Yes, yes,
status.
yes, I get that.
So
Yeah.
it's a very kind of open energy, and it's interesting that it has come from this comedy drama background, because it's the one thing that you don't see in comedy and drama, because it would be too boring.
Yeah, the only drama.
Yeah, so I don't know if people watch Hacks. Hacks is interesting
Well, I've never watched
because,
that. Tell
and
us
there's,
about that.
there's a, older woman comedian who's based on Joan Rivers, and a young woman comedian who goes to write for her after she's been cancelled on social media. And the two of them are both like uncomfortably high status, but they're always vying with each other, and they're always slightly moving towards happy high status in the good moments of the show, and then both of their egos come under attack and they slip back out of it again. So that's like a kind of a status battle between the two of them. But it's very interesting to think about it in terms of women, because we don't really see very many women who are happy high status.
We've got Michelle Obama.
Well, there are lots of women, and it also is very, very personalized. So,
Mm.
people who no one ever wants to be like Angela Merkel. I'm fascinated by Angela Merkel. No one ever talks about her. She is way, way more powerful than, say, Michelle Obama in terms of like the voting record. And,
Yeah,
Michelle Obama has never been elected. She's never held public office. Angela Merkel held public office longer than any other woman has. She had an incredible reputation during her time in office, and she's happy high status,
yes,
but in a very old school science teacher kind of way.
yes,
So she has her way of doing it, like Christine Lagarde, the economist. She's another brilliant, happy, high status person. So there's a lot of, Mette Frederiksen, in Denmark. There's a number of women who embody this,
mm,
but
mm.
because they're not flashy and they don't have that like kind of Beyonce quality, we don't talk about them very much,
No,
which I
we
think
don't.
is really interesting.
So, I mean, it's become, I mean, niches too. You've done so many different things. You're writing. How does it all work in your life? You were saying it's all really about connection, the writing, the stand-up, the podcasts, the books, going on tours. How do you keep your energy going with all this?
um, I don't really think about it. I just only do things if I'm really interested in it.
Yes.
And I'm really lucky that I've sort of sorted my life out from a long time ago. I haven't had a salaried job since 2001. Um, and I'm lucky that I fell into that. I fell into that because I took a redundancy from a newspaper job, and I thought, oh, I'll go freelance for 6 months. And 25 years later, I'm working for myself and always have done. And that's been right for me. And I get a lot of energy from being able to do what I want to do and not having to, come back after lunch at 3 o'clock or do
Yeah.
what other people say. I don't like doing what other people say.
No, that's the thing that binds freelancers together. We're not very good at doing what other people want. I think
Yeah, I don't like doing
good
what
at
other
being
people say.
told. Yeah, or that you can only have
And
your holiday in July or something, not very.
yeah, and I like, being able to connect with lots of different kinds of people. And I do need a certain amount of alone time as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a writer, I think. I don't, I feel very confronted if I'm too much alone. I can find that difficult sometimes to get the time that I need to get writing done, to be that alone. So I have to balance that quite carefully, because I get a lot of energy from doing stuff and being around people and talking. And you can't do that all of the time if you're going to get a certain amount of writing done.
So that's a bit more difficult. You're sitting in
Yeah,
the
so it's
bathroom.
a challenge, but I mean, it's it's a challenge that I've got used to incorporating into my life. So it's not that it's not exactly going down a mine, you know.
Do you ever panic that it's all going to stop? You know, that no one's going to buy the book, you won't get, no one's going to come on do you get what the rest of us get? Existential dread? It's not actually that
um,
existential.
I I think yeah, all the time. I mean, I think that's just normal. I don't assume that anything I ever do is going to work. A lot of the things I've done have not worked. Um, I I'm careful how I measure the success of things. So
Mm,
the success of things for me is not so much, did this become a massive bestseller or did this get XYZ numbers? There will be some other measure that I will have found, like, did I find that really interesting? Did I love that person? Am I glad I put that out in the world?
mm,
Those things I can control.
mm.
And yeah, of course, everybody gets, blindsided by all of the disappointments. And, it's not easy trying to do these kinds of things, but it just comes with the territory that some of them work and some of them don't. And that's just how it goes.
So yes, and I imagine that readers and listeners will respond to you. I think when
Yeah.
people contact you and say, I mean, you that book really, let's say that book because there's lots of practical, advice on how to own the room. It really helped me give my speech.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when that book first came out, it was not a massive success. It was not a bestseller. It is now because
Mm,
I wouldn't let it go. That's 8 years on. But
that's amazing.
most books have to be counted as a bestseller in the first 4 weeks that they go on
That's right.
sale.
Yeah,
And it wasn't. It didn't do what I wanted it to do or what the publishers then would have wanted it to
yeah,
do. It took a
yeah,
long time. And so I had to learn to take my own measure of success from it, which was, well, is one person responding to this and saying, yeah, I understand this book, I get it, I feel better after reading it. Um, and I was seeing that. I was hearing that from people
mm,
and not just
mm,
from people that I knew, from people that I didn't know. And
mm.
so you think, okay, maybe there's something in this, and then you just push it and push it. And now, yeah, we'll get messages from people all the time saying, I got a pay rise because I followed something that you said in the book. Or, I get a lot of messages from people saying, I spoke at my relative's funeral. And that's I love it when I receive those messages.
Yeah, that must feel good. Great, you help someone do
Yeah.
something that they
Yeah.
were
And
finding difficult.
it's all things that they could easily I hope they can see they can actually do this easily. And the only thing that's standing in their way is their belief that they can't.
So,
And
yeah, sorry, carry on.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to say that as soon as you show people, like, everybody feels this way, everyone finds this difficult, it's not that there's something wrong with you, it's
Mm.
natural. And the more that you care about something and worry about it, the more it means you should do it. It's not a sign you shouldn't do it. And once you show people that's just a thing, they stop obsessing and they think, okay, so how am I actually going to do this?
Do
And
you
that's really
think
lovely.
some people find this stuff easier than other people?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I don't really believe in anybody being born to do X.
Mm.
I think that certain people's background and experiences and what's been put on them in the past has a huge bearing on whether they think they can do this thing. But if they can, that's, easy to connect to therapy, right?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah.
If you can explore what those things are and sort of separate them from you as a person, you can see that those things don't necessarily need to hold you back.
Yes.
That they're not nothing. They're not nothing. And it's not just, oh yeah, that happened, put it in a box
Yes.
and crush
Yes.
it like in the Book of Mormon. You can't do that. Of course we all have difficult things that we've contended with, but you can come to terms with them and then think, okay, so now what? And I do like to say, yeah, now what, to people as well. Of like, it doesn't mean so now you have to go and be Beyonce. Some people might think, do you know what? I've got over those things. I feel more confident, but I don't actually want to do loads of public speaking.
Yeah.
Great. Great. Like,
Yeah.
and I've come across quite a lot of people who've been attracted to talking about this or reading about this and finding out more, who maybe think, oh, I'm not confident and I want to try this. And they overcome that, but they realize what they most want is to encourage other people.
Yeah.
So they might then decide to take a bit of a back step and encourage other people on their team, but they're not doing it from a place of fear. They're doing it from a place of, this is what really nourishes me and makes me feel good. So I'm not on a mission to say, everybody in the world should have a TED talk. Like, God forbid, if anything,
No,
I think
I can't bear. I can't do
I
anything.
shouldn't say this, but we probably need fewer public speakers.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I can't do anything.
And a lot of the stuff that I preach as well is about listening. Which again, that can be a bit of a complicated message because some of it is about speaking up and people who are not entitled finding ways to get them to speak up. But a lot of it is recognizing that listening is way, way more powerful sometimes than taking the floor. And actually taking a step, as a journalist, taking a step back, leaving space, leaving silence, and seeing what happens. That can sometimes be the most happy, high status power move that you can make.
Yes. Yes. I think that's very true. I quite often when I'm counseling couples, I can often say to someone, actually, just hold your space. Just hold your space.
Yeah.
You don't have to say everything like blah, blah, blah. Just,
Yeah.
give a bit of air around this problem and see what comes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in working life now, people are very frequently in meetings, whether it's online or in real life.
Yes.
And they sometimes have the impression that the person who talks the most in the meeting has the most power or is the most influential or is the most senior or is this or is that. And really, when you talk to people who really do have influence and power, it's usually the opposite. It's the person who's listening
That's very interesting, isn't
and
it?
figuring it all out and recognizing that very little is going to actually get decided in this meeting. It's going to happen outside the meeting. Yeah, so all of that is really, really interesting.
It's fascinating. Do you use it in your family, or is family life just totally different?
I hope I don't use any of this in my family. It would make me such a horrible person. Um, I'm just trying to think if it's made any difference in my. I guess doing all of this has made me into. I hope, and my family would just laugh at me saying this. I was going to say a better listener, but my children would just laugh at that. So that can't possibly be true. I pretend it's true, but I'm sure it's not.
That's so fun because I think listening is probably quite good, but they wouldn't, and saying things like, "I hear that you're upset." Or,
Yeah, well, these things are a cliche, aren't they? But
yeah, they are, and my children, they're like, "Can you stop putting that? Stop it." And what I hear you say is that they're like, "Oh God, just be a normal person."
yeah, my mum, the therapist.
Yeah,
But I do think those are really valuable. They're valuable tools. I think if you can camouflage it and hide it a bit,
yeah.
like that's from conflict resolution, isn't it? Is just silence and then repeating the last thing the person said and
Yes.
then leaving more space.
Yes. And then just repeating back what you
Yeah,
heard. Yeah. So
yeah.
I think that's a very good technique to do that. There would be a very funny comedy sketch in that, though I'm sure there would be somewhere along the line. But anyway, so the book's coming out now in paper.
Yeah, and paperback. Yeah.
That's been 8 years of you thinking, I'm not giving up on this.
Yeah. Well, it was helpful that I started the podcast with
Yes.
really no intention, and it kind of just grew organically. And then in late after the podcast had been going for a year, we got Hillary Clinton.
I know, that's
And
amazing.
so that was a bit of a turning point. And then 4 months after we got Hillary Clinton, it was COVID. And
Mm.
then during COVID, there was no better time to make podcasts.
Mm. Mm.
So a lot of things happened organically that I could not have predicted, that meant that this could become a long-term project and I could devote a lot of time to it and keep nurturing it and growing it, which has been really great.
And so that's out in paper. What else? I know, I'm sure that's enough. But what else are you up to? What else would you like people to know about you and what you're?
Well, one of the favorite things that I love doing is writing radio plays. So I've got a number of radio plays on BBC Sounds archive, from
Wow.
Radio 3, Radio 4. Um, and I just absolutely love doing that. And I wrote a radio play about a year ago, that is called, One Summer in Luka, and it's about a region of Ukraine that was invaded early in 2022, and that play grew into the book, One Ukrainian Summer, which is about time that I spent in Ukraine in 1993, 1994. So I really love being able to do things that have nothing to do with how to own the room, but they maybe have some other kind of application of that work. So, like, I love being in the studio, for radio drama and seeing how actors perfect that, and seeing the person who does the walking on the gravel and all of that.
And all the sound
Um,
effects. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I love that.
Because you
And
speak Russian, don't you?
yeah, I do. Yeah, I studied Russian at university. Yeah. So I do apply this concept of connection really,
Yeah.
really broadly, and I I'm going to be writing more radio plays this year, and I'm working on a new book project that's about women and work. But that's going to be a pretty long-term research project that I'll be working on for a while.
So you've got many, many skills.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, many skills, many curiosities, let's call it that. I'm endlessly curious. I'm always finding new stuff to be interested in.
Is connecting and communicating in a language that's not your own language difficult, or do you now, I always think, well, I'm trying to speak a different language and connecting is quite hard because it's hard to get the nuances, but maybe you've spoken Russian long enough that you don't feel that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think in a way I'm really interested in this relationship of connection as something that has defined my whole life, because from when I was a child I wanted to learn languages, and I learned French from 11. At school I did German and Spanish, and then at Russian I did at university I did Russian. So I've always loved languages, and I loved the humor of learning a language and like being a stupid person. I love being a stupid person in another language. Like, I don't really speak Italian, and I went to Italy last year, and I just love being a stupid Italian person.
I
Like,
thought
I
it's very
probably
funny when you call the cat a rat or
well,
something.
I loved, like, when my kids were really little and they were learning language. I just love all of that. I think it's one of the most playful and sweetest things about all of us is how we acquire language, and the things that we say to each other, the silly things that we say to each other. And they're really revealed when you learn a new language. Yeah, so I've always loved that. And I sometimes think that was what I loved about stand up, was that it was like learning a new language. Like, no one else can speak back to you. You can only speak to them, but you have to learn a way of talking that people are going to buy from
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Just as when you learn a new language, you have to get them to buy what you're saying, even though it probably doesn't make very much sense.
Yes.
So I love all of that. Yeah.
So people can come and get any of your books, but the paperback, it's available on Amazon. But all pop into your local bookstore, everybody, and
Yes,
support your local
support your
bookstore.
independent bookstore.
Yeah, I'm very big on that. And if they don't have it, ask them to order it in. I do think it's really important we do that. So please do that. Where else can people find you?
I'm pretty much too much on Instagram. So at Viv Groskop. Yeah, that's the main place I would say.
And your plays, radio plays are in
Yeah,
the
they're on BBC Sounds. Yeah.
so but mainly Insta.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Insta, and I have a newsletter if people want to. Go to my website, vivgroskop.com, and you can sign up for the newsletter. That comes every Friday. That's free.
Ooh.
And that's usually about whatever I'm thinking about that week, or sometimes it's about owning the room. It can be about lots of different things. Sometimes it's about Ukraine, about lots of different things.
Great. Okay, that sounds brilliant. So there was so much we could talk about, but we could be on all day, but people aren't going to listen to us all day. Apart from we're only in the room, so maybe they would.
Thanks, Lucy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on, Viv.